and welcome to the 2015 Youth Question Time event. First, Copeland Youth Council would like to thank Copeland Borough Council, Copeland Youth Forums, UCLan and the Samuel Lindow Foundation for organising the first Copeland Mayoral election Youth Question Time. Also, thanks to everyone for taking part and everyone who brought a question to ask the candidates. So let's get started.
Why do you want to be mayor? I think I'll pass this to Mike.
Why do I want to be mayor? I've been brought up and lived in Copeland all my life. I was born in Whitehaven, grew up in Egremont, lived in St Bees, and I've lived and worked around the area for a long, long time. So I've got a real passion about Copeland and about the area, and I think there's so much potential within the area that's untapped. When you look at the, we keep on hearing a lot about the doom and the gloom around the place, but Copeland's in the top 10% nationally for average earnings. It's in the top 5% for economic growth. We've got very low crime rates, and we've got a huge opportunity with massive inward investment on the way. And I want to really be involved to make sure that inward investment's channeled in the right places, because walking around our towns and our villages now, all the things that I've just discussed aren't really reflected. It doesn't feel like walking down the high street of Whitehaven or Cleatormoor or Millham that we're living in a place where house prices are affordable and wages are high and unemployment's low. When you see all the boarded up windows of the shops and people struggling to get apprenticeships and career opportunities for our young people coming through. And I want to be involved to try and assist the change, so Copeland feels like and reflects all the good things that are there. And having lived here all my life as well, when I was growing up, in the 80s and 90s, in my teens and early 20s, the nightlife scene and the social scene in Cumbria was fantastic. And I was seeing all that going backwards and backtracking, and I want the young people of Copeland to have a Copeland like what I grew up in. Where there was work and there was good social life, and there was good sporting facilities, and I want to be really a part of facilitating and engineering that change and making sure we reap the rewards of the vast investment that's coming our way.
All right.
You're okay.
Thanks. Chris?
I'd like to stand to be mayor for Copeland because I would like to make Copeland a better place. I think Copeland is a great place to live. I think it could be even better. And I think running the council differently would be a step towards that. I'd like to see a council that's more receptive to a wider range of ideas, not a council in which only a member of one political party can be on the executive, and if I become mayor, I'll try and involve all the political parties on the council in the executive. I would like to see a Copeland council that listens better, a Copeland council that's more friendly to business, that can help more people to come in and get a wider range of jobs. We are very dependent in this area on one single industry, the nuclear industry. Now, that's a fact of life. No one's going to change it, and we need to support that industry, but we need to attract other industries as well, and I'd like to try and help do that.
All right, thanks, Chris. Steve?
Yeah, I ask myself that question every night after a day canvassing and talking to people, why do I want to be mayor? I think, quite simply, for me, it's politics and improving people's lives through trade unionism, because I was a trade unionist. It's been part of my life since I was your age, really. I remember sitting in an audience like you. Fortunately for me, it was in Brussels, not in Westlake, because I got the privilege of being invited over to Brussels when I was a youth officer for the Labour Party. I went over and met people, young people from all over Europe. And that was very, very early on in my political career. And the job that I've had over the years of representing people and working with businesses, local councils, because I was born and bred in West Cumbria, but I spent 8 to 10 years over in the North East. So I've seen what happens over there. And Mike talks about walking down the streets, and I've seen the changes that happen in the North East over the last 10 or 15 years. For people who, Newcastle was always the buzzword. People now go to Gateshead. 10, 15 years ago, people never went to Gateshead. The investment in Gateshead has been tremendous. So I've seen what can happen. And I think we are, as everyone said, the investment that's coming in is huge. It's massive. It's bigger than the Olympics. that sort of investment's coming into West Cumbria, and we need to take advantage of that. I want to be the mayor because I think over the years I've gained the skills that will enable me to ensure that we get a good share of that. Don't get me wrong, we will get benefits of that wherever. I think the proof of a good mayor will be why it goes. And finally, the point I would make about why I want to be the mayor is a point I've said a number of times throughout the campaign is I've got a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old boys, and when they're so your age and slightly older, been to university if they want to go, they have a choice whether they want to create a career here or they want to go. If they want to go somewhere else to see the world or see life, that's up to them. But I wanted them to do it because that's what they want to do. If they want to have a career, a job, good prospects, I want that to be here if that's where they want it to be, and that's why I want to be mayor.
All right. Thanks for your answers on that. Next question is, what have you done previously, and what experience do you have? So I'll start that one with Chris.
I've been a manager in BT, which is one of the biggest companies in the world, for nearly 30 years, and I've had a very wide range of experience within that. So I know things like how you manage a reorganisation, what a business case looks like, how you sort out major IT projects. So I do have some of the organisational skills from that in terms of some of the admin skills that the mayor would need. I have been a councillor before. I was on Copeland Council for 4 years, but before moving to this area, I was a member of the executive. The planning portfolio holder was my precise title, of a successful council where I turned around the planning department so that it got the largest planning delivery grants in the country. The planning delivery grant was something that you got for improving performance under, in fact, the last government. So I have experience of turning around council services, and I think that gives me both the knowledge of how to run things and some of the knowledge of the politics and about sorting out public services. I've also been a member of the Health Authority and have always taken a huge interest in NHS issues, which is what got me into politics in the first place. And I think it's terribly important that we all campaign to fight for services at West Cumberland Hospital, particularly but not only maternity. And I think my experience with the NHS would serve me in good stead for fighting for our hospitals.
Thanks. Steve?
Yeah, I think I started on the point of my career as being in trade unionism, and I think the good part about that is that because you work with lots of different businesses, over the years I've worked with hundreds of different businesses from the point of view of trade unions. But that gives you a great insight into change, because business, public sector is always changing. They're always bringing restructures in, they're always doing different ways of working, there's always new initiatives for how people can work better. And I've worked with all them strategies, some good, some bad, some well delivered, some poorly delivered. So hopefully over the years I've gathered enough experience to know what's good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't. And I've always thought that to do that, the worst ones never take the people with them, whether that'll be the people who work there or the people they represent. And it's important over the years, and I think I've gained that experience to be able to... Copeland's going to go through a massive change. With this investment that comes in, there'll be some resistance to certain things, there'll be things that people are unhappy with. And the mayor's role will be important in dragging that people with you, and with the whole of West Cumbria. One of the important things as well is that, yes, you'll be the Copeland mayor, but you've got to build partnerships with other people. Copeland Council and what it can actually deliver, we've got to be realistic. Copeland Borough Council this year's got a budget of about £7 million. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot. Copeland can't do a lot with that. What it can do, though, is influence a lot, and therefore the mayor needs to be somebody who can use our influence. And I think what I've done over my whole career, when I worked because I worked at Sellafield and Marshall before I became a trade union activist, is that you've got to be able to negotiate, you've got to be able to get things done and influence things, and that's what I've done all my career, and that's why I think the skills that I'll bring are vital. But as well as running the internal services of the council, make sure they're run effectively, work with a number of councils over the years, seen the good, bad and ugly in councils, and they are constantly on change, but I think we need to be more focused and more driven as a council as well.
All right, thanks. Mike?
On leaving school at 16, I went down to Sellafield with one of the contractors as an apprentice. Spent 9 years straight out of school and straight onto 12-hour shifts, and it was a great life experience. It was, you know, in the first phase of big inward investment with the expansion work going on at Sellafield when there was thousands and thousands of contractors here in the 80s. And, you know, I got great sort of experience of people skills, of working with people from all walks of life, to, you know, people who'd come out of university with master's degrees and were engineers, to lads who were going around sweeping up on the floors. You know, I had a complete career change in my mid-20s when I went into financial services. I joined a large insurance company, Pearl Assurance, as a representative on Cleator Moor. And in 11 years at Pearl, you know, when I started with Pearl, we had 6,000 agents on the street and 9,000 head office staff. And I went right through the ranks at Pearl, working in different parts of the country, and became one of the 5 regional sales directors with Pearl Assurance. And a long time with Pearl, you know, one of my roles was to go into to turn around failing units and failing businesses. The first one being up at Carlisle. I went into a branch that was 117th out of 120 in the country, and it became the most successful branch in Pearl's history. And, you know, I had experience as a regional director working down looking after London and the South East, back up into the North East, and then moved on to another multinational company, Zurich Assurance. I went to Zurich as a group manager, and again it was in a revival mode, looking at a failed business model and turning it round and making it profitable. And there's a lot of correlations to the situation Copeland it finds itself in now to what it needs to be going forward. You know, I spent a time as a national sales director with AXA Insurance, and then went to work with a new start, independently owned financial network, which in 3 separate years was in the Sunday Times fastest 100 growing businesses, and it became the biggest independent network in the UK. You know, alongside that, I've also ran my own businesses, and still today I run my own wealth management business. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, you'll see a lot in my campaign material, you know, a lot of the gumption behind what I'm trying to achieve is getting Copeland Council to think business-like. You know, I don't think the electorate want to hear statements like harsh decisions have got to be made. You know, what they want to hear is radical solutions, so those harsh decisions don't need to be made. You know, there's enlightened councils around the country, and I've seen them on my travels, that have gone in for commercialism. You know, Kent's probably the best example, and who saw the light earlier than others, and now have a private company generating £600 million a year, and you don't hear about too many harsh decisions on the streets of Kent. And, you know, and I think the experiences that, you know, I've gathered, the people experiences from my days contracting and working within big business, and bringing that sort of mentality to Copeland. Because, you know, it's not about, you know, we're getting less, we're being given less, so we'll have to cut more and get less. It's about Copeland, we should be wanting more and doing the things that will give us more. And, you know, the only way we can do that is become self-reliant and self-determined. You know, it's not about saying how much will Sellafield give us this year, or how, you know, going around with the begging bowl to see who'll put what in the pot. It's about getting proactive, get on the front foot, and generate our own money that we can feed back into services. And, you know, that's the background that I come from, where, you know, we've got a lot of staff who work for Copeland, where it'll secure their jobs. You know, we'll create trading companies that will create new employment. You know, we'll work with Sellafield, of course we will, but, you know, what we want to do is get actively involved in the supply chain, where we've got bordering industries that'll bring jobs and prosperity to all the towns like Cleator Moor and Millham and Egremont and Whitehaven and Dizzington, and it'll give all our young people a chance, and it'll all come together to start reviving our high street.
All right, thanks, Mike. So the next question is, as mayor, what would be the first thing you would improve, and why? So we'll start that off with Chris.
Bin collection. I appreciate this may not be the ideal thing to say to a youth audience. I guarantee that if you ask your parents what's one of the things they're annoyed with Copeland about, it's one of the things that some of them will say. We have all sorts of issues with bin collection in terms of there is a service that's available to stop those pensioners who live in rural areas having to push their bin half a mile to have it collected. But very few people know that service is available, and it's got to be better publicised. There is a strong argument about whether or not we ought to be having collection weekly or fortnightly, as it is now. It used to be weekly. The present outgoing government actually had a scheme to give financial support to councils to go back to weekly bin collection. Now, one of the very first things I would do would be to start a review of the fairness, effectiveness and frequency of bin collection to try and make sure we get it working better for the benefit of people. And I would hope to put a proposal. I'm not going to guarantee we will be able to do it because it depends who's elected to government and whether that money is still available, for looking at the options to go back to weekly bin collection, and to look at options at giving people more options for recycling, so they find it easier to get the things that they have recycled and help save the planet.
Thanks. Steve?
Well, the first thing you do when you walk in the door, I think the staff want to lift. I think there's some good staff. I think we need to lift them. And for people who know, there's a lot of service reviews going on within the council now. They're actually looking at how they provide their services. I think the thing is that whatever they find, we implement them, because we'll stand up here, we're a new, but let's be honest, we've got to carry on. We've got to improve, but we've got to carry on. We can't start again. There's no new money coming. I mean, I find it extraordinary that somebody uses Kent Council as an example. Kent Council's down south. It's more affluent. They generate 600. I told you the council's budget is 7 million. Kent look after a population of 1.4 million people and has a budget of 1.2 billion. You're not comparing like you like. We've got to realise what we are. The Copeland Council is so I'll be realistic. Ain't going to make promises I can't deliver. So we've got to be realistic. We've got to take the council forward. Except there's more that can be done. We can generate more income. We can run things better. I think there are a few services. We've got to understand the services that we've got and make them better. Waste, for instance, don't agree with the bin collections. I have a bin collected. I talk to people regularly. People are used to 2 weekly bin collection. What it does frustrate them into recycling. Well, recycling's a frustration. But again, realise what we can do. Copeland, there needs to be a Cumbria-wide waste strategy, because the county have responsibilities in terms of the waste. So we need to have a partnership with them to develop how we do it. The reason we don't recycle as much or as much as we can in Copeland often is about the business. It's about the commercialisation of it. Recycling, believe it or not, it is a commodity. People sell the recycled stuff. The problem with Copeland is we have to get rid of ours straight away because we've nowhere to store it. What the big recyclers do is they have storage places, they can store it and they can sell it when the price is right. We have held fortune, so therefore need to work with the other councils in the area and the county to develop a county-wide waste strategy, because we've got to be realistic about what we are. Yes, we've got to improve, yes, we've got to get money, but we've got to deliver on what we can deliver. We can't make promises or highfalutin agreements about what we can't do. So the first thing I do is be realistic. What can we achieve? There's lots coming into the area, but our services that we run, the quality of some of our services are poor. There's two major things. We've got all the service reviews, and there's an issue for a number of our staff who will come back in terms of revenues and benefits. So it used to be, I was councillor for 4 years. When I was on the council, our revs and benefits was the pride, not just the county, but probably the north, because we had a great, excellent revs and benefits. It's gone out for whatever reason, because the service is now poor. If we were an excellent service 20 years ago, I think we can have an excellent service now. So it's about getting the services we provide to the public back to where they should be, some of the best in the country.
All right, thanks. Mike?
I think quite simply the first thing I'd want to improve is put the people and the interests of Copeland right at the top of the agenda and before that of any political party. You know, I'm running this in a non-political way, and we'll look to build an executive of the most appropriate talents who can deliver what Copeland and Copeland needs. irrespective of what colour ribbons they want to wear or what party they support. And that's with no disrespect to people's political beliefs. On the same day as this mayor election, we have a general election. And you know, if you're a strong Labour supporter or a Conservative or a Liberal, I would urge you to get out and vote for them. But in the local elections, it's about Copeland and Copeland people. And you know, that will sometimes mean the council having to challenge the MP, whichever party it is, to ensure that they're representing the best interests of Copeland and the people, and not just the political party. So, you know, the biggest thing that I want to do, I want there to be more participation. I want it to be less political. You know, I want to build a plan where we've got a common goal, where the whole community is coming together to deliver. Steve didn't like me comparison with Kent Council. You know, it is in the south. It does get a bigger budget, but I wasn't talking about the budget you get, whether it's 1 billion or 100,000. I'm talking about people who had the initiative to go out and generate even more money and not rely on what the budget. And there isn't just Kent Council, you know, there's Bradford District Council, there's Shetway District Council, there's Aylesbury Council, and if you look them all up on the internet, look at the things that they're doing to make a difference in their communities, because they're thinking out of the box, they're being a little bit more enlightened, and they aren't standing in front of the electorate saying we're going to reduce we're going to reduce payments where you're travelling to school, we're going to cut services, we're going to cut into. So I'm not going to focus on a single issue. You know, my first job if I'm lucky enough to be elected, is to call in an independent audit to look at all the financials, the spending, the budgets, the activities, the responsibilities and the power of the council. Because I don't think you can make any decisions until you have all the facts laid bare in front of you. You know, it's the effective framework of managing any successful business. So what I will do is I will establish a clear starting point. These are all the facts. This is where we are. This is where we are. Where do we want to go? If you've got a journey and you've got a start point and you've got an end point, then you can put the route and the detail and you plan your route map along the way. And you know, the one thing for sure, Copeland will not survive as a council if it's going to continue just to rely on handouts from the government or generous benefactors within the area. We have got to get on the front foot. We've got to be entrepreneurial, and we've got to, you know, I work in the business community, and I know a lot of very, very good small, medium enterprises that work in Copeland, and we need to be engaging with these entrepreneurs. You know, we need to be looking at the opportunities that are there and making sure we're optimising and maximising, because the inward investment's coming, and if we miss the boat this time, like we did last time, there will not be a third opportunity. But getting back to the key point of the question, what is the main thing I want to do, is I want to take politics out, and the people of Copeland come before the interests of any political party. And you know, I went to the council meeting last night and a proposal came to the floor, and all of one party voted one way and all of the other party voted the other way, and it was the same old political dogma that's held this area back for years and years.
Thanks. Alright, so the next question is, Copeland Youth Council are committed to improving transport for people without access to cars. What will you do to help them improve public transport? Steve?
Yeah. Public transport. Again, being honest with you, Copeland doesn't run any public transport, but that doesn't mean it can't be involved. I think there's good work being on the trains and working with others to develop the train links. I mean, I think it's appalling that if you go to Carlisle, you want to travel further, but you can't get back from Carlisle on a Sunday until the afternoon. There's no trains in the morning. I've been down to Millham. People in Millham have to go to, if they're unfortunate and be unemployed, have to use a job centre. They've got to use a job centre in Borough, so they've got to travel from Millham to Borough, but there's no public transport for them in the afternoons, or some afternoons to get back. So we have to develop a package that brings public transport back. Now, one of the issues that and again, and I use it time and time again, but it's about being realistic about what we can do. Most of the travel that we need to do and the talk will be just out of Copeland. I mean, to go to Lillyoט, I mean, lots of people probably in here will be apprentices based at Energies. That's actually not in Copeland, it's in Halliday. So we have to have a joined up public transport scenario. One of the things where I will learn from others is in the North East. At the moment, they're looking at what's called a quality contract with the bus services to take them back into. If you the authorities, few of the local authorities have got together to bring the privatised bus services not back into nationalisation. It's as close as you can get. It's called a quality contract. And what they do is the public authorities set what they want, and they have some money to do that, to invest in public transport and in the buses. And I think it's something that within Cumbria, because it would have to be a Cumbria-wide, it's not a strategy that Copeland can do itself, unless it got some finance from somewhere, and that's really difficult, and there's other things to do. But I think for public transport needs to be looked at in terms of the buses and the trains. The train services need to be more regular, and carriages. I mean, I'm not a tweeter and I'm a Facebook person. I don't really use them. I've got a Twitter account that I've got one posting on. No, it's not posting, is that Facebook? So a tweet. And what it actually was, it was when I was on the train, and I've actually said on the Twitter, it was the last train back from Carlisle, been to watch the football. I was coming back, and I put on, "It's like herding cattle," because that's what it's like. And that we deserve better. We deserve a better system. We deserve an upgrade. We deserve a line. The road system needs sorted out, the 595. Again, it's out of our hands, but people who tell me we can't afford it, I disagree. We've got to make the case for it. We're getting all this inward investment. It's a nuclear thing. To say we're going to take politics out of it, understand the party politics thing, but the role is political. The role is a political role. We live probably in one of the most political areas in the world, not just the country, because nuclear is on our doorstep. We've got nuclear power decommissioning, and down the road we've got nuclear submarines in Borough. So we're a centre of world politics sometimes, not just local politics. So we need to be aware of that. We need somebody who understands politics to deal with that. But think about this, about the road improvements, the numbers talking about 60, 70 million. The gate, the fence around the site cost 500 million, so the money can be there if we need it. Sorry.
Cheers. Mike?
Steve's absolutely right. It's the transport framework is not in the remit of Copeland, and what we've got to do is positively manage what we can affect and positively influence what we can't. So it really is all about working in partnerships. The Copeland Council, the Allerdale Council, the MP, the large employers. There's a huge inward investment. Part of the contract of any future development should be linked to infrastructure. Infrastructure into West Cumbria, not just Copeland, right through, and possibly even beyond, because if you get up to Carlisle and go across to Newcastle, it's like a donkey track. So the whole infrastructure needs to be looked at. Now, I've seen manifestos and political parties dating back 20 and 30 years, and the A595's on all of them. It's consistent, and it's not happening, because what we've got to do is get joined up thinking in the area, where, as I said, we have partnership where everybody is pulling together on the same side, irrespective of party political interests, to drive the best deal for Cumbria. So, the infrastructure's got to be tied into all the development and inward investment that's coming in. And that will open up other industrial opportunities as well, so we're not just self-reliant on one source of wealth generation in the area.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah. As both the other candidates have said, the transport's the responsibility of the county and the government, not the responsibility of Copeland. That is not a reason to pass the buck and say we can't do anything about it. It's how you have to be realistic about how you do it. As it happens, one of the things that I think might be part of the solution for getting the sort of joined up structure that people have been talking about is changing the structure of local government towards having one unitary authority for this part of the world. I wouldn't be upset if I was elected if I turned out to be the first and last mayor of Copeland, because I actually think there is a very strong case for having a West Cumbria unitary council, probably incorporating not just Copeland, but say Allerdale and Borough, or some other part of the west of the county, in terms of both what districts do at the moment and what the county does at the moment, so you could actually get that joined up approach and bring the services together and try and get everything working properly over a wider area. Unfortunately, the last proposal was for a unitary Cumbria, which is just too damned huge because the area of Cumbria is absolutely vast. So that is one thing that may be a solution to the problem. I think it is extremely important that we look at how we can get more money. A couple of weeks ago, myself and Stephen Howdson, the Conservative candidate for MP for the area, wrote a joint letter to the Chancellor. The Chancellor had said that Manchester Council can keep the new money from new rates, business rates for new developments. And we said, well, can we do that in Copeland for the rates from the new nuclear bill that's coming in, some of that vast amount of money? And if a government of whatever colour were able to let us do that, then that would need to be channelled into things like more cycle lanes, more buses, and yes, massive improvements necessary on the A595. I actually spoke at the public inquiry against the downgrading of part of the A595 when it was detrunked a few years ago. What happened was the overwhelming weight of evidence from the county council, the borough council, parish councils, and all three political parties locally, everybody put up watertight arguments against downgrading the road. There was just a person from the Department of Transport of the then government said, oh, I think we should do this. And unfortunately, the decision was forced through. That needs to be reversed. We need to have much better transport links.
Thanks. So the next question is pretty basic. What will you do to make life better for people under the age of 18? And we'll start with Mike.
Well, hopefully with economic generation, it will give more opportunities, and with the improvement of the infrastructure of the whole of Copeland, just create a better place to live. I started off today saying, I want the youth of today to grow up in a similar or better type of Copeland than what I grew up in. I wanted, as I said, I want to go right back to the drawing board and reinvent and rethink the way the council operates completely, to make it that it's profitable. And we're not talking about cutting services, that in future elections we're talking about ambitious plans, not starving off the threat of closures and things like that, but not talking about closing down the civic hall and other public amenities, but having new modern facilities that our people can go to. We should be able to strive for those sort of ambitions in a modern economy in Copeland. So the big thing that I really want to do is make the council more effective, leaner, more effective, and more ambitious in its outlook to create a better environment for our people to grow up in and grow old in.
Thanks. Chris?
Right. Steve referred earlier to his sons. All three of us on this panel are parents. I have a pair of 13-year-old twins, and I think often, what could I do to make life better for people of their generation? I think some of the leisure and health facilities which the council provides are really important here. And so, for example, my kids have both benefited from the swimming courses run by Copeland Council. I'd like to see that sort of service extended and improved. I think it's also very important that they have opportunities for the future in terms of education and, yes, jobs. One of the things that the present government has done is provided millions more apprenticeships, and they're planning to provide another 3 million apprenticeships if they're elected. If whoever wins has a policy like that one, I would want to have Copeland introducing more apprenticeships and using its planning powers and to support more apprenticeships so as people have more opportunities. I think education and a wider range of education opportunities is really essential to making sure people have opportunities for the future. And I think we also need to look at housing, so as we build more houses so that people have an opportunity to find somewhere to live without being forced out of the area by the cost of housing. So those are a few of the things I'd want to promote.
Thanks. Finally, Steve?
Yeah, I think it's important that we provide leisure activities for people. I mean, the lack of all-weather pitches, facilities, is shocking around here. Really, I mean, I've just come back from France. I went over with one of the local junior football teams and took my children to play football. the number of 3G pitches we passed on driving through France was unbelievable. Got to be more facilities, but it's not just the main sports like football and rugby. I was talking to somebody the other day, if somebody was really excelled at netball within Copeland, they have to travel so far to get on to do something decent. And I think there's got to be opportunities for children to take part in sport from a very young age. But I think the important thing as well is, because coming here today has made me think about how, if mayor, I would engage with young people. So I think the first thing I would do on this one is get maybe yourselves together and say, what is it young people are lacking? Because there's all sorts we can, but reality, we're not going to deliver them all quickly. So what are their priorities? I had the pleasure of visiting Millen Town Council over the week. They're getting a skate park put together. It's one of the things for us, for the young people down there. So it's really about asking yourselves. But I think it's obvious. I agree with Chris. The swimming's very, very important. Having that facilities there that we can provide, and I think we need a proper leisure structure to encourage people to play more sport, be involved. But there's other things like the youth clubs that are out there that they're good. They do a lot of good work, and it's encouraging them and developing things like this, getting you to do things that you wouldn't necessarily think of doing. But if we can get people involved, talk to them, and I think it's important that we probably do, if possible, have a strategy for young people about what it is we're trying to develop, because we've all heard about this inward investment that's going to come in, and we think of roads, we think of one of the important things as well is improvement, and schools are going to be improved. But with an improvement of schools, they get better facilities for young people to do after school activities and be able to do stuff. So I think there's lots of stuff we can do and help to do. But I think Copeland again, and when I've said in the past, the last few questions, we have to work with others, I think Copeland can probably take on some of that responsibility to encourage others and work in partnership with youth groups and whatever to encourage and develop more for young people, whether that be sport or just somewhere to go, hang out with people, tweet, and I got it right this time, to tweet, and internet cafes. I mean, I'm shocked by the number of electronic gadgets out there, but people don't always have access to it. There's always one or two that don't. So provide facilities where people can come and use internet in a safe environment is probably useful as well. But I think the important thing is to get young people in and ask them what their priorities are as well. Thanks.
I think we've got time for just one more. What are your goals for our community, and how will you achieve them? And we'll start that with Mike.
My goal is to see a successful Copeland. You know, the goals will be laid out in detail. You know, I've got a clear plan, a plan of action, a framework that I want to work to. You know, it's going to start, as I've said, with a complete audit of all the activities, responsibilities, spending and budgets that Copeland currently undertakes. And when I've got that starting point, I'm going to set a clear objective and focus and goals, and it's going to be completely transparent. You know, I want complete openness. You know, I want to open up the council so that when the council have meetings, you know, not just the young people, you know, the working people, the retired people, they can all come and contribute to that. So I want a Copeland that's in touch with its community, and I want a Copeland that's innovative, ahead of the game and prospering. You know, not just struggling by from year to year, papering over the cracks and just trying to prop things up and repair them. You know, I want a community that's got ambitions for better things for itself and for its people. And that'll come through engagement. It'll come through taking away a lot of the political infighting that goes on. You know, I went to a council meeting last night, and, you know, initially I was pleased to hear there's a £14.5 million investment coming in. I was then surprised to hear that none of the councillors in the room knew about it. I was then shocked to hear it was all already allocated where it was going to be spent, and then completely not surprised when the two sides of the divide voted completely differently on whether it should be spent there. You know, and that can't be, you know, any way to run any kind of organisation. You know, and with an election coming up, you know, the sensible decision on that would have been to defer it, to give everybody time for consideration, and see how that money could have been best invested for the whole of the community. But you know, it was pushed through with block whip voting and all the political nonsense that I believe is holding this community back from prospering to be the place it could and should and hopefully will be going forward.
All right, Steve.
I've got two goals really, in terms of what the council can do and what it can influence, because I think we've all talked about that today. In terms of what we can do and what we deliver, I think they've got to be delivered effectively and efficiently. We've already spoke about revs and bends, but we've got other departments that the council runs, its waste services, its building control. They've got to be delivered effectively, efficiently, and if it can be better to generate more income. But let's not beat ourselves up. Mike talks about an independent audit. I'm confused by it, because we do one every year in the council. We have independent auditors come in, and it costs us nearly £90,000 for the pleasure. I won't be spending money on a not necessary independent audit. We balance the books every year. You could argue about where we spend it, but the books are balanced. And in fact, the independent auditor, who is Grant Thornton, who were one of the biggest in the country, come in and always give us a good report and say we spend and we manage our money properly. So it's about priorities. It's about where you're going to spend them. It's about what are your priorities. We have the money. We balance budgets. Whether we spend them in the right place, we'll all disagree on that. It's about priorities. But that ain't for somebody independent to come in. It's for your elected representatives to say where we're going to spend our money. So the goals are to run our service effectively, better than we currently do, so that people get a good service. The other goals are outside what we can influence. We want to attract as much investment to the areas we can and get it used properly so that we get the benefit of it. Mike's already spoke about when he was growing up. I don't necessarily recognise the same time because I grew up in the town, but I do remember Egremont being a boom town. It was the place to go for a night out. It was everything. What is it? Nobody would want to go for a night out in Egremont, and that's a shame. The investment will come again. We want a legacy. That will be the goal, to have a legacy, so that in 20 years further on, when hopefully, if there is still a mayor, depending on unitary authorities and everything, when there is, we're talking about how we can take the next step. Not we've gone backwards and we want to come back up again. It's about the next leap. It's what we're going to do next. So it's about the goal is that when all the initial investment, because there'll be a blip when new nuclear comes, there'll be a blip because we'll need all the contractors to build, and then they go. The legacy will be there is something left for the future, and that's the goal, to ensure that there is.
Thanks, and Chris.
Yeah. Before I come to my vision, I would just like to correct something that's just been said. It was said that I think there was a bit of overly hasty dismissing of the idea of audit, and there was the statement that the audits have always been fine. Actually, it's not that long ago that the auditors refused to sign off Copeland Council's books for a year. The last couple of financial audits have been okay, but the Audit Commission has given some of Copeland Council's services in the past few years some of the worst audit results of any council in the country. So the suggestion, the audit's all fine, all greatest respect, Steve, that's not actually correct. And I think that Mike has a point, that bringing in people to check whether you're delivering the best available services does have some advantages. I wouldn't necessarily want to be audited all over the place for everything, because you do have to watch the money that's available. But I do think bringing people in with a fresh approach can help you to improve your services. And some of Copeland's services do need that. With regard to my vision, I would like to see Copeland be the best place in the country to live, to work, to be born, to retire, and to do business. And it's a great place already. We have some beautiful country. We have some lovely people. We have some of the best food in the world, and we have some of the best views in Britain. And I think that gives us a huge amount of potential, which we can build in to the Energy Coast programme, use that to leverage, to get the money, to get some of the infrastructure projects that we need, make sure we continue to improve education facilities so that young people have a better start in life. And I think Copeland can be the very best place in the country to live.
I'm finding it hard to distinguish between the three of you. Why should somebody vote for you and not the other two?
Okay, I think that obviously proves we were all trying very hard to be on our best behaviour and not doing much attacking one another, which is one of the things that people in general and young people in particular always get very upset and annoyed about. I would say, of the three candidates, I have the best balance of experience. Steve has some experience of the political and trade union process. Mike has a lot of excellent experience of business. I think both of those things are relevant, and as someone who's both run council services and had 30 years experience as a manager in business, I think I have both of them. I think the other thing that I would say distinguishes me from Steve, less so from Mike, is that I'm standing as someone who believes the mayoral election has the chance to make a positive change from the way the Labour Party has run Copeland. Because I think one of the problems with any council where one party is in power for way too long is it creates a not invented here culture, and it means that not enough other ideas get a look in. Copeland has been run by Labour for decades, and I think it would be a really good idea for somebody else to have a go, because I think the shake-up that would create would be an excellent idea in terms of making people think, making people less complacent, trying another way of doing it. So that's one positive reason to vote for me as opposed to the other, and one positive reason to vote for myself as opposed to Steve.
All right, thanks. Steve?
Well, I think I'm disappointed you think we're all together, but I think one of the things as well is that a lot of what we've talked about broadly is sensible. It's about carrying services forward. It's about making us all efficient. I think the difference is how we do that when we get in there and we've got 2 minutes and it's difficult to get that fine detail. I think why you should vote for me is that I've got the experience of dealing with the people. I think we've all accepted that it's about influencing people. In my dealings, I've had dealings with the NDA, who are a major player in this area. So I've dealt with the chief exec there. I've dealt with most of all of the local councils, districts, both political figures and officer figures. So, and I don't accept that this party thing. The reason I'm the Labour Party candidate, to be honest, is that I've not been involved with this council. I'm a Labour Party member, trade union activist, but I haven't been involved in this council. I'm totally different than the current. I've Labour values, but different. In my time in my political life, in terms of the Labour Party, I've seen a number of leaders of the Labour Party. They've taken the party in different directions, and so have other leaders of other political parties. And I think I'll be a different type of Labour. It will be Labour, but it'll be a different type of leader. So I don't accept that we need that change. And one thing to remember is, when council have voted over it, most times, they talk about party politics. And they do disagree, but they agree on quite a large amount of it. And I think the issue about taking party politics out of it is it makes it really difficult, fortunately, to make a decision. The mayor needs to be a leader. I think I've got them qualities. It's what I do every day, is I lead a group of people. So I think the difference I'll make is I understand the politics, I understand business because I've dealt with them, I understand local government, and I'm a different type of voice, and I will drive the council forward.
All right, thanks. First question.
I think where I differ from the other candidates is it's a completely different approach than where the council have been before. You know, historically, and all we've heard is about government funding, about handouts from Sellafield. What I'm wanting to do, and what I've got the experience to do, is bring a business approach to running the council. You know, and what I really want to do, the starting point, it's like a broken down car. Because, let's, put the cards on the table. The reason we're having an election for an elected mayor is because by a majority of more than 2 to 1, the people of Copeland were completely dissatisfied with how this borough's been run and how it's been run over a whole number of years. And if you keep on doing the same things, you keep on getting the same results. So what we need is fresh, innovative thinking, things that's going to turn the tide and take this borough forward to a better tomorrow than it had yesterday. And what I think I'm bringing is a completely different, radical approach, and I'm bringing that innovative thinking. I'm bringing a business model to make Copeland prosperous and to be able to generate its own money where we can pursue a policy of self-determination, not of dependence. You know, there's a huge, you know, we've got to, you know, right throughout the country, we've got to get rid of this dependency culture. It'll be okay, someone else will always sort us out. Well, somebody else won't. You know, what we've got to do is take personal responsibility and collective responsibility. And you know, I'm not anti-Labour by any stretch of imagination, and I'm not anti-Conservative by any stretch of imagination. I'm pro-Copeland, pro the people of Copeland, and pro getting the best deal for Copeland and its people. And I'm prepared to work with people of all parties. I'm prepared to work with bordering councils, the festival committees, the parish councils, the youth councils, and bring all the views together to deliver the best outcomes for the people of this borough.
Question from AWAS Cumbria. Hate crimes are on the rise, and if elected, what would you do to tackle rural racism and prejudice against migrants?
All right, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, I've got the figures in front of me, but one of the things I've noticed over the years within Copeland, and not just Copeland, West Cumbria and in Cumbria in general, is our number of migrants is very low, but unfortunately our prejudices are fairly high as well. I mean, when I worked at Sellafield and I was on shifts, it was always the night shift debate about people coming in taking our job, and that's just not the reality. That's not the reality. I'm disappointed that there is the hate crime coming up, and I think it's about education. It's about educating younger people about the importance that migrants play to the economy. It's about doing that. Again, in terms of crime, though, I think it's about working with other agencies to develop that. We've got a police and crime commissioner. County Council takes the overall responsibility, but I don't think Copeland should abdicate that. I think one of the important things as well is that one in Copeland's plan, one of its strategic plans, it's about trying to find a location for gypsy travellers. But it's a hot potato. Nobody wants to deal with it, and actually that's one decision that will have to be taken after the election, because this current council has decided not to do anything about that. And there's been a number of areas identified that could have it, and it's not because of any other reason, just that Copeland has the land to be able to put them there. But the problem is, if it's dissident, you have the dissident councillors jump up and down. We don't want the gypsies. So it's about education, not just of the wider public, but of the council itself, to be taking the tough decisions. We've got to say these people are welcome in the area. We're going to need more people. I mean, when I was growing up, people from working were migrants. I mean, that's so. They weren't. It's like, don't want them here. We can't have them. So we have changed a bit. But I mean, there is real problems out there, and it's about education. It is about the education. It's about encouraging people and explaining to them. But I think we do have to work with the other bodies, the police and everybody. But the thing is for Copeland to make the decisions and not duck them. I think the Gypsy Traveller one is a perfect example. That debate will happen after the election, and wherever we decide that is going to go, there will be problems with that local community, and we know it's coming. So that's wrong to me. People should be welcome, and that they shouldn't be against it. But the debate will start, and the mayor will have to handle that debate, and it's something that I'm keen that we take on, because if that means we need an education around that, then we should have the education around that.
All right, thanks, Steve. Mike?
I agree with Steve in terms of, you know, it is about education. You know, I don't think anybody wants to see any kind of prejudices. So a lot of education is involved in it, but also the full enforcement of the law as well. You know, where you know, you commit a crime, the police have got to enforce the law and make sure that people realise that it is a crime. Because, you know, I think, you know, some of the most prejudiced don't actually think what they're doing is a crime. You know, that I guess is where the education comes into it. But again, it's also about people working together again and not vested interests. You know, I thought it was quite disturbing on the headlines of the Whitehaven News last week was war zone. And then when you read the two enemies in the war were the police on one side and business against crime on the other side. Now, business against crime's objective is to be against crime, and the police's objective is to prevent crime. Why are they having a war? You know, something just doesn't stack up, does it? Absolutely. And you know, I think what we've got to do is get people working together. We've got to be inclusive. You know, I know the council, one of the good parts in the meeting yesterday, they published a paper on equality. You know, and we've got to enforce that equality. You know, so that you know there's no prejudice on race, sex, creed, colour, whatever it is, and where that exists, it's got to be stamped out. People have got to understand that it is a crime, and when it's committed, then they face the consequences of that crime. But I really, you know, again, one of the things I'd love to get the business against crime, the police, you know, all of them around the table and to come up with where they can work together for the common good. You know, I've read this cumulative impact policy, you know, about, you know, where they're looking, you know, the answer to get rid of nighttime crime is to have no nightlife. You know, well, I'd have been devastated if I was 18, 19 and they were shutting down all the pubs and the clubs. It would have been probably the biggest disaster that could have befallen my life at the time. And, you know, I don't want to see that happening. I've got, you know, 2 kids, you know, now who enjoy pubs, clubs in the way I did. But, you know, and I don't like to see the fact that, you know, every week we see coach and carloads of people driving off to Newcastle and to Carlisle. And, you know, Steve mentioned earlier, you know, when I was growing up, Egremont was a boom town and we were having buses coming in from Borough, Carlisle, everywhere. It was the place to be, and that's what I want Copeland to become again. You know, I want it to be a safe environment where people respect other people, and we can all reap the benefits for that.
All right. Chris?
Yeah. Just on Whitehaven Business Against Crime, I've worked with them. They're great people. In the particular instance I worked with them on, it was trying to use Copeland's licensing powers to spread the pub watch scheme, which tries to protect those people who want to go and drink responsibly from the nutters who want to get wasted and then cause trouble for everybody else. And they're not the majority, they spoil it for everybody else. With regard to this whole issue of migrants and hate crime against them, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the things that's really important is you make everybody clearly understand that everybody, whether they're a migrant or not, will be treated equally before the law. As it happens, 2 of the most extreme sets of abuse that I've picked up during my time involved in politics was on exactly opposite sides of the issue of how you deal with traveller communities that Steve was referring to. I got told by one Tory voter that she hoped my coffee choked me and that she felt I ought to resign, or she felt like doing it, because I had voted to give planning permission for a traveller site which was well run, was clean, was not inhabited by criminals, and which clearly was needed to help that council get designation so that we could say these are the places where they can go, and then the other places where they were going and were causing massive amounts of trouble were not. I also got a fair amount of abuse when I started a prosecution which resulted in the head of a gypsy family going to jail because he had been behaving in completely ignoring planning law in a way that would have got anybody else sent to jail. And for once, we were actually successful in making sure it was seen that the same law applied to everybody. And that's important if you're going to have public support for the law and that people understand. It's wrong to go and bash somebody up who was born here. It's wrong to go and bash somebody up who's a migrant. The same law applies to everybody. As it happens, Cumbria Constabulary has a very good programme of tackling and dealing with hate crime and racially motivated crime in the area, and I think it's important that whichever of us wins, that the councils continue to work with the police to make sure that programme is continued and supported.
Next question is from Rachel, and again it's directed at all of you.
As a young person going to university, I think it's quite difficult when you live in Cumbria because when you're looking around for job opportunities, most of them are related to the nuclear site in Sellafield. And then as someone who's interested in fine art, I was wondering like what kind of opportunities you've been into young people who weren't interested in them, because I know that speaking to young people who aren't wanting to work in that kind of industry like Sellafield, most of them wouldn't stay in Cumbria because it's not really a secure prospect for them.
Mike?
The unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in, Rachel, is that is exactly the position as it is at the moment. You know, it's not just fine arts. There's a number of roles that you can come out of university, and there just isn't any prospect in Copeland. And you know, I know from my own experience, you know, I've sort of travelled around and worked around the country a bit, but I've always wanted to live and be based in Copeland and be able to carry out the work I do here. And I know a lot of people who are looking at careers like yours would feel the same way. And I think that's why we've got to look to develop opportunities beyond Sellafield, and you know, and a lot of it's by a lot of sort of the theme of what I'm trying to do with the council is to commercialise its operation. And you know, once you know I've carried out a full investigation of all the things that the council's responsible for, of all the things that the council can influence, it's looking at the commercial opportunities that can spring from that, and how businesses can spring up in you know, new businesses can jump onto the back of that commercialisation bandwagon. You know, we do have some examples. You know, you've got Roma, for example, which is a fantastic small medium enterprise that prospers on the back of Sellafield, but it's completely different in the way it operates. So you know, I'm going to be looking for opportunity, you know, commercial opportunities, and trying to engage with small medium enterprises to how we can expand and broaden our economy. You know, one of the things that I'm keen to put in place, if I was lucky enough to get elected, is like a business network, you know, effectively a Copeland-wide Chamber of Commerce, where it brings some of the brightest entrepreneurs of the area together, and we can, you know, look at the opportunities that's emerging from this inward investment, and look at the potential that the supply chain brings, where we can create new and different industries that create opportunities for people of different interests and different ambitions. So yeah, that is a big focus of my campaign. You know, Copeland should offer something to all of our people to be able to live prosperous and lifelong careers in the borough.
Right, thanks, Mike. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's the reality of where we are at the moment, that the opportunities are in a very tight knit, and I think we do want to, we need to broaden that out. It's vital that we broaden that out. And I think looking at what some of the more progressive councils around, they also, and not just councils, but in history, when you look back, progressive countries even have invested in culture and in leisure facilities and everything else. You need to do that alongside it. And there's lots of plans for West Cumbria, and most of them focus on, I mean, the British Energy Course focuses on renewable energies and all that sort of thing. But one of the things I've learned about is there's talk of a tidal barrage just off the Solway up by Workit and that brings a lot of electricity. But what it also does, I didn't realise, is they build like the barrage, and everything within it becomes like a tranquil road surface. So it brings an opportunity to bring water sports and tourism type opportunities within that. Now within that all trickles down. So I think, yeah, we do need to broaden out. We need to look at what we're good at and how we can develop things on that. I mean, NNL, for instance, in the National Nuclear Lab, was looking at being involved in the European space battery. So the space race, for people who are interested in it. So there is opportunities. But I think in terms of small business, it surprises me as I drive around Cumbria. I mean, I go down to Grange, Borough, driving towards Cartmel, and there's very little there in terms of housing and whatever. But there's little niche businesses set up, and they can do it with the internet and environment, because it's like people who are dress designers or artists or they can do a lot on the internet now. But the problem is getting them started, getting them developed. So I think it's important that we allow small businesses to get off the ground, because that's the only way we're going to get these niche and get away from that bigger picture. So it's about bringing investment. I think there is help out there for small businesses, but we'd like to not only build on that, but let you know about it as well. Because I think we've got lots of good things here that nobody really knows about. I mean, one of the things you asked me about what I would do before, which I think is linked in here, is that Copeland website is shocking. Trying to find anything on there, Copeland Borough Council's own website is shocking. All the information, or a lot of the information is there, but you can't find it, it's not in there. I think it's important. I want to have a new business, I'll set it up. So how do I set it up, where do I go for help? I think that it's Copeland's duty to say, if you're wanting to invest, do something in this area, these are the people you go to.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that. Chris?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things we can do to help broaden our base is indeed boost that opportunity for telecommuting. I mean, this is what I do actually. When I first came to Copeland, I was working in the global part of BT and doing a job that could be done anywhere in the world. I now do a national job that could be done anywhere in Britain and use the telephone and the internet for 95% of my work. And that is how an increasing number of small businesses, including in the fine arts area, can and do operate. And I think it's really important, therefore, that we promote more to give people opportunities both to get faster broadband in the area and to help encourage startups of that kind of business. Now, obviously, if I was mayor, to avoid a conflict of interest, I would have to avoid dealing personally with anything that involved or potentially involved my employer, BT. So this might well be something that was delegated to one of the executive members that the mayor appoints rather than my being involved personally. But I can tell you, for example, at the moment I'm not holding public office, so I can speak freely on it, and I can tell you one of the best things that's happened recently was a joint agreement between the government, the county council and BT to bring faster broadband to large parts of rural Cumbria. And I think it is really important, if we want to have diversity in this area and to promote the sort of business that you're talking about, that we use that sort of imaginative thing to help small businesses set up and make more use of the internet.
Thanks. And finally, Mike.
I was slightly concerned about a statement you made before about recycling, how it's just a frustration. And I just wondered how a man with that kind of attitude plans on reducing our carbon footprint.
I don't. Well, if I did, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it was. It's a frustrating that we can't recycle more. I mean, I would encourage recycling. I think it's an area that we definitely want to increase. But the reality at the moment is that I travel to in-laws and family who live out in the area, and they have the opportunity to recycle 6 different types of material all in one bin. There's one bin that can take it all and it can be recycled better. I want to see recycling increased vastly. The frustration, I can't remember, but the frustration for us at the moment is that because we don't have this Cumbria-wide waste strategy, Copeland is limited. It's reduced the amount of recycling that we can do. And that shouldn't be the case. Anything we want to recycle, we should be able to recycle it. Whether it's food, I mean, we've never done food recycling. I don't believe in Copeland, and everywhere else they do. So I want to reduce the food. I definitely think recycling is vital, but at the moment we haven't got the infrastructure to allow us to do it well and better.
All right, thanks.
So
is that something that you would plan on changing then?
Well, I've already put a statement out to say that I'm looking to call Cumbria together to have a waste strategy. Because I'll give you one example, which would make it easier, is black bins. We recycle in black bins. Every district council buys its own bins in this council, in this county. It's got to be cheaper if we all bought them together. Got to be cheaper. We could, and then if it's cheaper, we've got more money to spend on other things. So. We've got to, but we've got to do it as Cumbria, because we tip where we take it to isn't ours. It's somebody else's. It's the county's responsibility in terms of where they have some responsibilities, we have some, and there isn't a plan of how we all do it together better, more efficiently, so we can recycle a lot more.
Right.
Yep. Well, I'm from the Copeland Youth Council, and we've chosen 3 priorities in our youth council. One of them is health, and health, as you may know, goes into 2 strands: mental health, which statistics are rising significantly, and also Westcombe Hospital, which is basically at the urge of being cut and being closed down. What I'm wanting to ask you is, Are you going to help us support our campaign and our priority, and what are you going to do that?
Chris.
Okay, first of all, I must challenge you on your point. The Copeland Council is on the verge of... Sorry, the West Cumberland Hospital is on the verge of being cut and closed down. Actually, we're just about to open a brand new £100 million refurbishment of the hospital. And the Dean of this University of Medical Studies has described it as one of the best small hospitals in Europe, one of the best ones he's ever seen. And it's really, really important that when we're campaigning to keep services in the hospital, we do so in a positive way that pushes that message. And let me tell you why. All hospitals, especially if they're moving towards being teaching hospitals, have to have a constant flow of new professionals, particularly trainee doctors, coming through, and they recruit that from all over the country. Now, when a trainee doctor is looking to see where they might go for their next placement, one of the first things they're going to do is Google that hospital and see if it's a good place to work. And if we allow all the press to be printing about the hospitals, to be saying, hospital problem, hospital chaos, hospital about to be closed, what's it going to do? It's going to stop people coming here, and it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we do have to fight for our hospitals, but we've got to do it in a positive way, which talks about securing the future of our hospitals, making sure that brand new investment, that £100 million hospital, is used. We need to fight for that. We've got to get that message over to the Trust. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying we should be complacent about it. We've had issues about services going off to Carlisle, which is consequently overcrowded. And hence you've got the situation when people get vomiting bugs and some of it comes back over here, and we have major incidents declared. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we mustn't fight very hard indeed for our hospitals, but we've got to do it in a positive, constructive way that talks about securing the future of our hospital. So that's what I would say on the subject of the West Cumberland Hospital. You also referred to mental health. When I was a health authority member, I actually had to do both visiting and act as what's called a manager for the purposes of the Mental Health Act, which meant I was one of the people who, if someone appeals against the order keeping them in a mental hospital, I actually was one of the people who had to hear that appeal and decide whether they should still be kept on a section under the Mental Health Act and required to stay in hospitals. And I became aware then, mental health in this country is a Cinderella service. The vast majority of people want to forget about it, want it out of the way and shoved away, and the people locked up and forgotten about. And I think that's a mistake. Although it hasn't always been perfectly done, I really support the care in the community policy, whereby you care for people in more accessible ways, where they're given more normal lives, and I think we've got to move very much in that direction. This is not something that the Mayor has any power over whatsoever, but it is something I would want to use the moral authority of the Mayor as an elected person to push for. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you were worried about people being pushed onto Carlisle. Almost a year ago, I had to have an appendectomy, which is quite a minor procedure, and I was at Whitehaven Hospital. And they transferred me over to Carlisle to get it removed, which not only wasted the time of all the nurses which had treated me previously, but then wasted the time of the ambulance to transport me to Carlisle. Would you say that as a mayor you would attempt to eliminate that and have minor procedures such as an appendectomy to be done at Whitehaven Hospital?
I would want to fight to have as many procedures done at West Cumberland rather than Carlisle or Newcastle as possible. My wife had to go to Newcastle to have a tiny little cyst removed from her neck. I had to go to Carlisle to have 2 teeth removed. Both those procedures used to be done at the West Cumberland Hospital. And you're absolutely right about some of the reasons, and it's also part of the reason for the overcrowding at the North Cumberland Infirmary in Carlisle, which is full. So yeah, I would fight to keep as many services as possible at West Cumberland, with the proviso they've got to be safe, they've got to be top quality. And we need to do it in a positive way, how we campaign for that, so that people see this as being a good place to come and work, which it is.
Thanks. Mike?
Again, I think we come back to the thing about power and influence, having the power to do something or being able to influence how something is done. In the lead up to the general election, you know what, you're going to see the NHS as a big battleground. It's going to be the big battleground that it was in the last election, the election before that, and the election before that. And really, whichever colour party has been in place, we haven't seen any real difference. You know, you'll get Labour scare stories, the Conservatives are going to privatise it. You know, they privatise part of it, 5%, and the Tories privatise 6%. So pretty much the same policy. You'll get Tory scare stories saying they're running Labour's running Wales and they're running it down. Up here, you know, I think what we've got to accept is that there's going to be, whoever wins the election, it's not going to make that much of a difference to the NHS in general. I genuinely believe that. And just a sort of quick point, you know, what I would like to see is a common agreement that there's an agreement brought about a percentage of the national income is allocated to the NHS, and it's run independently of government, so it can't be used as a political football from one election to another. That's on a national thing. At a local level, it's about influence. I think it's about getting all vested interests and interested parties working together. I agree with Chris. I think we want, and I'm certain Steve's going to agree when he speaks, you know, I want free services for everyone, you know, at the point of care. And I want at West Cumberland Hospital, every service imaginable that could be done to be able to be done there. You know, there is the odd things about where there's some genetic illnesses and there's maybe only 7 or 8 specialists in the whole country where obviously it couldn't be, but you know, procedures like you're talking about should be able to be done at the West Cumberland Hospital. Down at Sellafield, where I don't know, at any given time there's maybe 9,000 people on site within a ringed area with not a very good road to the hospital, they can only actually deal with 2 accidents at the same time. So, you know, if anything, not even of a large scale, of a small scale and a medium scale, they can't cope with it. Now, what we've got to do is get, you know, this is about engagement of everybody in the area, about pulling everybody together on the same side. I think the Save the West Cumberland Hospital campaign team, they've done a great job in highlighting the issues. I think they've done, you know, they should be applauded for, you know, making people understand the changes and the service that have been taken away. And we've seen the power of people starting to roll back some of those decisions. In Sellafield's position and other large employers, it'd be very difficult for them to come out and say, we've got a hospital that's not fit for purpose, because that will create mass panic. You know, if they come out and say, if anything happens here, it's doomsday, because it would, you know, it would be a public relations nightmare. But, you know, I think getting, you know, privately, you know, along with, you know, the Copeland Council, with Allerdale Council, with the local MPs in both those boroughs, you know, the campaign groups, the large and small employers, and what we do is we collectively petition for the best hospital we can possibly have, and you know, that should be one of the major and prime conditions for any planning applications for the GDF repository, for future build at Sellafield. That should be contractually part of it, is the development and upkeep of that hospital.
Thanks.
Sorry for over and over.
Yeah, thanks. Just on, I'll start on mental health because I think that's big, is that I think one of the issues is, and I feel like everybody else, it's an influence one for the mayor, it's not something that deliver. I think mental health might be slightly different in the sense that organisations have to work together, because what I've seen a lot of adult social services, children's services, the health service, everybody wants to pass the buck, and it's somebody else's problem. But at some point we've got to hold everybody accountable as well. So mental health gets missed by various, or it's passed on to somebody else, and we need to. So I don't want to see the NHS as the NHS separate. It fits into everything. The Labour Party's health and social care. It's about bringing services together, and councils do provide some of this, not the direct mental health, but some of the people they deal with have mental health problems, who they need to signpost to the right people, make sure they're getting them. So, and I think mental health is a major issue in Cumbria, not just in Copeland, in Cumbria. We've got no specialist skills for autism to diagnose and treat and deal with it. It needs to be sorted out. West Cumberland Hospital, agree. I think Save Our Hospital is the wrong title. They do some great work. The hospital ain't going to close. Like we said, we just spent millions of pounds on a hospital. What we're in danger of is having a massive hospital that has no services in it, and that's where the argument should be. But again, we fell into the trap in West Cumbria, and it's not decrying all, because there has been great good work, but there was an SOS campaign up and running. A Save Our Services campaign had been running for years. The Save Our Hospital one has overtaken that, so the good work that they've done, we're very good at, not just in West Cumbria, we're very good at creating committees, we're very good at creating organisations. We need to be saying we've got something. If it's not, let's get the right people on there to change it. I think the hospital is vital. One of the things for me on the hospital, the importance of the services, because I've had cause to use it over the last few years in consultants, we struggle to attract consultants to come to this area because of what we talked about in the first half. It's about our facilities, our leisure. If you're going to be a consultant and they earn over £150,000 a year, they want a good leisure time. They want what's going to attract them to West Cumbria. So the big vision will bring everything else. I think the other thing as well about West Cumbria Hospital, and we've talked about the massive investment that's going to come in. We're going to have thousands and thousands of contractors coming to the site, contracting, building a new thing. There's going to be accidents, and so we need the service, and that's where the big vision is. We need to convince people we need it.
Thanks. And just to make sure we don't upset anyone over further issues and stuff, I'm going to just skip the next few questions and hopefully come back to them. But I'm just going to go to Mara's question, which is for Chris.
You said that parking in all Copeland Borough Council car parks will be free after 3 PM if you get elected. But I'm under the understanding that it's one of the sources of the Copeland Borough Council. And if any repairs or even the independent audit, where will the money come from when they need to be done?
The money will come from the money will come from what's currently in the budget for the Mayor's political assistant. The legislation which sets up the position of directly elected Mayor also allows him or her to appoint a political assistant, and at the budget meeting of Copeland Borough Council this year, they passed a budget of £100,000 to cover the salary of the Mayor and the salary of the Mayor's political assistant. I believe that people in Copeland want more services and less politics. So that's the point of Mike, I know I agree with him at least that far on, and I would not appoint a political assistant. That would create around £30,000 or £40,000 of space in the budget which could be moved through into car parking, which would enable me to propose that we stopped charging in council car parks after 3 o'clock, creating more opportunity for people to come in and park and then come and shop and support local businesses. And that is where I would get the money from to fund the policy. Obviously, there would still be charges for people who were parking earlier in the day, so there would be still some money coming in to help support and maintain the car parks.
Previously, you stated about decreasing the taxes as well as reopening the Civic Hall, but where will the money come from if the council's budget is starting to decrease?
Right, well, what I did speak about at the beginning is, you know, my starting point is an audit to understand all council activities, spending, you know, everything the council undertakes and has got the power to undertake in its place. And from there to put a detailed plan together which would have some clear objectives. You know, I think things like the Civic Hall provided a real good public service. And you know, it could be that it needs business inclusion to make that work again, and it's part of a broader thing. You know, part of the the detail will all come once the audit's been done, but it's part of a broader thing. One of the issues with the Civic Hall's parking. You know, we've just talked about parking, and people won't come into somewhere when they can't park anywhere, and it's difficult to leave your car, and public transport doesn't support sort of nighttime venues anyway. I've talked a lot about the commercialism. You know, the commercialism of the council is about generating money to fund these services. The council has also got a lot of land and a lot of assets. You know, if you look through the asset list of Copeland Borough Council, you know, they've got a lot of brownfield sites. Now, those sites could be sold off. They could raise money. We could get affordable housing built on them. And when housing comes in, and you know, the council goes into partnership with some of the builders, that creates apprenticeships and employment, and it all brings money back into the area. You know, they're just sort of some of the examples. Some of the land they've got might not be the right land to do the things that the council needs to do, and it could be about selling some and purchasing others, because we've got to solve the parking crisis that's in Whitehaven at the moment. You know, we've got people in what, you know, everyone in Copeland's not fortunate to work at Sellafield on the relatively big wages that Sellafield do. We've got a lot of people who are working in Whitehaven who are going to maybe have to take the choice of not working there anymore because it's costing them too much to park there. A lot of them used to park on the gins for free all day, but you know, as much as Albion Square will deny it, that car park's full from 7:45 every morning, all day long. So you know, it's a broad range of things, but you know, the land and the assets is part of the thing about you potentially raising capital to reinvest elsewhere and more effectively, to run the audit and understand a starting point, and then to look for commercial opportunities, and that's commercial opportunities of setting up trading companies which are wholly owned by the council, or trading companies that are set up in partnership with entrepreneurs, and you know, even possibly setting the pots of money and running like a Dragon's Den type opportunity where we all support new start-up businesses in partnership with council as well.
Right.
You know, these are things that are happening around the country.
If you were to be elected, what would you do about the decrease in the healthcare services of West Cumberland, but the expected influx of people in the nuclear industry with the new nuclear developments?
All right. And Steve, can you start us off with that?
Yeah, I think I touched on it in the previous question, in one of the previous questions, that we are going to get an influx of people, and we certainly need the services there. There's a very small window between that happening, and I think we have to make that case in terms of, it's about influencing, it's about making the case that it's needed. It's the same with the road and the infrastructure. It's about a big vision. Any place needs a big vision, and I think there's lots of people out there develop big visions, and the council has to get one that it believes in, and it puts its heart and soul behind, and sells it, and goes to government, because ultimately it will be government, it will be government service, to bring healthcare, and then to the county, and then everywhere else. So you need to be saying to them, this needs to be delivered, these services need to be there, and these are the reasons why. And I think what you've touched on about the nuclear industry and the influx is one of the levers that we can use to bring them services back. I mean, there was a phrase a long time ago about choice in the NHS. You can choose with. I don't want choice. If I get ill, I want to go to my nearest hospital and be treated well. That's the choice. I don't want. I just want to know I'm going to be. Now I accept we ain't going to deliver everything in what. So there will be some travel, and I want that to be as little as possible. But I would like to see West Cumberland have a specialism that we were really good at, and that, because if you have a specialism, that brings everything else in. And so I think there's to look at that, but that needs to be developed using everybody. But you're dead right in we do need the services, because we're going to have lots of people, and it's one of the levers we need to use to get them services back into West Cumberland.
Right, thanks. And moving over to Chris.
Again, a lot of this was said in answer to the earlier question, but I do think it is very important that if we have new nuclear build that brings the people in, we've got to make sure that the community package that's part of that must include extra support for the NHS, because that will be something that's necessary to cope with those people. Obviously the community package will need transport improvements, but yes, NHS improvements will also have to be part of it.
Great. Yeah, brilliant. 30-second answer. And finally, Mike.
Yeah, mine won't be much longer, because I think we've touched on a lot of it, but it simply boils down to establishing where we are. We're here, we want to be here, and what do we do in between to bridge the gap? And that's about influence and getting all the stakeholders involved to put the blinkers on to the broader NHS all around the country, but all of us collectively in Copeland, business, politicians, councillors and the people, working together to ensure that we fight our case for the best possible services to accommodate everybody who needs them, and to bridge that gap from where we are to where we want to go.
I know that two of you are affiliated to political parties, one of you obviously isn't, and you've got, sort of, as a member of those parties, you've got commitments to their national pledges. Like today, the Conservatives have pledged to freeze rail fares, Labour have said that they're going to scrap police and crime commissioners, protect community policing and that sort of thing. So how will your commitments to the national pledges of your parties translate to Copeland area, and how would you respond to that as an independent candidate?
I think for quick turnaround of impact on what will benefit Copeland, it's more important what happens in the local election than the general election. You know, a lot of the things that are happening nationally take a while to filter down. We can't control what the national parties do, and you know, I'm not operating on a filtered down policy of either party. You know, politically, there's some things they're doing on all sides of the political spectrum that I agree with, and there's things that I disagree with. You know, where I'm coming from in this election is focusing all of my attentions on what's the best for Copeland and what's the best for its people, without any colour blindness whatsoever. You know, it's responding to the needs and wants and aspirations of Copeland. Is where I sit in all this. You know, I'm running a campaign that's not funded by a political party. It's self-funded. I've not no responsibility to a political party, because you know I feel that if you do, you know there's some lines. You know if you're going to wear their badge, you've got to support their line. You know, the badge I wear is Copeland and the interests of Copeland, and I'll have to work with whichever government gets into power in the best interests of Copeland.
Right, thanks. And moving on to you, Chris.
Okay, I did give a couple of examples earlier of national policies of my party which I would want to plug into. One was the apprenticeships. We have a policy of generating 3 million more apprenticeships in the next Parliament if we're in power, and I'd want to plug into that. I referred to the fact that in this Parliament just gone, we had a policy of supporting councils that wanted to move to weekly bin collection. If that's available, that's probably the only way I'd be able to fund that, although I would like to do that, but you have to look at what you can achieve. In terms of how things are going to work, I think we need to bear in mind that to make Copeland work, you're almost certainly going to have to work cross-party. On the basis of the feedback I'm getting on the doorstep, I've not yet heard finally how many candidates have been nominated. I have a very strong suspicion that there is a good chance Copeland Council may end up with no party having an overall majority. If that happens, then the only way it can be run is if you are willing to work with people of all parties. Fortunately, I'll tell you something very interesting. When I mentioned that to one of the officers of Copeland Council, and I'm not going to name him, that I would expect to appoint people to my executive of people of all three political parties, he turned around and said, "Your rules allow you to do that then, do they?" And I thought, doesn't that say something about the way Copeland Council has been run for the past 40 years that this officer asked me that question? Well, yes, they do. And I think it's really important that we do work together. And yes, fortunately, my party believes that the first responsibility of somebody who's been elected is to all the people they've been elected to look after. And they understand and they expect you to have to make agreements with people across other parties. And in fact, when I was a member of a council executive before, it was a three-party executive. There were Labour and Conservative and Liberal Democrat people on the cabinet of that council because nobody had a majority and we had to work together. So I have experience of doing that and I know I can.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, just in terms of the national politics, I'm not here to bore you about the national, but I think I agree with Mike. What they do, we have to work within because to a certain extent, we can't control that, whoever takes over going forward. And they might change if they've got a coalition, because what they've said they might not be able to do. So we'll just have to work within the national boundaries. I think one of the things what people need to realise when we've got a mayoral system now, though we might be in a particular party or group, I mean, because the mayor doesn't sit within them at the moment. The leader of the Conservative group or the leader of the Labour group on the council sits within that Labour group. The mayor will sit outside of that. They're not there. So yes, they're a party member, but they're not in the group. So they can't really be accountable if they're strong in their leadership. But I've mentioned about my experience and the fact I've been involved in politics a long time. One of them, and I remember things that are important to me. And when Tony Blair was the leader of the Labour Party and the Prime Minister at the time, he went to a Labour Party conference, and the conference voted something about a pension. I can't even remember what they said that was the party policy. Tony Blair said immediately after the vote, in conference, I've listened to conference, but I will not be implementing it as Prime Minister because I lead for the people. And that has stuck with me. When you're the leader, yes, I've got my allegiances. I stand up, I say I'm a Labour Party member because that's where my leanings are. But if elected mayor, I will be the mayor for the people of Copeland.
So is the prevailing message to take away from this that actually partisan alignment isn't going to matter as much as it might do in other elections, in the Copeland mayoral elections?
The system of mayor means the mayor and his executive will have a lot of delegated powers that they can do without going back to council and parties, yes.
So party candidates aren't going to be restricted by their national commitments, by their national partisan. Do you know what I mean?
Only in the sense that if they become law, then we won't be able to get maybe the pot of money that we got before. But in terms of the mayor of Copeland, they will run Copeland how they see fit. Now, for me and Chris, that might mean our party's getting unhappy with us, but it doesn't mean we can't do that.
Right, that's interesting. Thank you.
Just to confirm that, I mean, I've been a party member since I was 17. And in that time I've seen governments of different policies pursue all sorts of things, and some of the things Conservative governments have done I didn't agree with. The way the rules work, and in fact this is the law, is that if you're elected as a councillor, you're not just responsible to your local party, you are responsible to everybody, and in that sense Steve is right. The significance of the party label, it gives you an idea of what the people who are standing on that label believe in. That can be useful to people in judging what they're voting for and what you're likely to get. But at the end of the day, you also have to look at the individual and the policies, but it's the responsibility of whoever gets elected to govern and do their job in the interests of all the people.
Just quickly for an example, look at all the councils in the North East. Most of them, nearly every one, other than probably Teesside has got an independent mayor, a Labour ran. They are very different councils.
Just again a final point on it. I don't think you can represent a party, wear the colours and take the funding and then not be expected to follow a party line. Because if you didn't want to follow a party line and you wanted to broaden it out to, by definition you're independent of party influence. But if the party's going to fund you, they're going to sponsor you. And yesterday in council, the leader's departing speech, which was very good. She says, we need to take politics out of local government. And I'm thinking, well, in the 10 years as leader, there's never been a single member of the opposition in executive. And then at the end of it, when they took a vote, one side voted one way in entirety and the other side voted the other way. And I find it inconceivable that even people who are in the same party, 20 people all in the same party, always have the same opinion, and on the other side always have a different one. Well, we get.
We will allow another round of speeches on this.
Yeah. So it's, but by definition, independence is what it is. You have no allegiance or responsibility to a political party. I think if you wear the colours, you have.
Can I just make an observation on that? If you come to lots of Copeland Council meetings, you will often see the Labour Party vote as a bloc. You will sometimes see the Conservative councillors vote as a bloc when they all happen to think the same way. You will also, not infrequently, if you've been to Copeland Council over the last few years, hear the leader of the Conservative group stand up and say, we are having a free vote on this. And what that means is that people have discussed it, and they've come to the conclusion that to represent their own wards, it would be wrong to try and force people to vote in the same way. And you will see, it does sometimes happen. It didn't yesterday, but believe you me, when I was on Copeland for 4 years, I saw it happen a lot. You will see people saying, we have a free vote, we're not going to all vote the same way in this way. You will also see occasions that when the Conservative leader says, I'm asking my group to vote this way, and some of them don't. Now, when the Conservative group leader does that, he looks at the sky and, oh God, and then nothing happens. When that happens in the Labour Party, the person concerned is in very serious trouble. And we've got one person in this room who ended up outside the Labour Party because because he felt they were stopping him doing his job, holding the executive to account. I hope I'm not misrepresenting you, Brian. No, and it also happened when I was on the council before. I proposed to change one word of a policy document that the Labour Party wanted to adopt to make it slightly more democratic. One Labour councillor agreed with me, and when he voted for the motion I proposed, they were going to discipline, and he ended up resigning from the Labour group over it. So we don't have the kind of discipline that Mike is talking about. To be honest with you, I would say Labour do.
Well, I'm going to be quick, but just to say I disagree with that, but just to be thinking about the independent thing as well. Mike might not be part of a party, but he's actually sponsored by the Time for Change group, who are standing candidates in the local elections as well. So to say he's independent, though they're not a party, Time for Change have created themselves into almost a party.
Mike is totally independent, self-funded. Won't take sponsorship of anybody, so can't be affiliated to anybody or responsible to anybody. Time for Change are a campaign group who I supported the campaign for an elected mayor because I've been a big believer in the elected mayor from day one, and they have chose to support my campaign because an independent candidate is what they said they wanted from day one. I'm not part of Time for Change, never have been part of Time for Change, but I do welcome them supporting me because they've got a common aim, but affiliated not in any shape or form.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions we have time for today. We would once again like to thank everyone for coming and the candidates for taking the time to answer the questions. Thanks a lot.